when I realized they were just taking my soul, and we could call it an astral body and the consciousness, when they were taking my astral body out of my physical body, that was the big red flag for me. So that was when I said, wait a minute, what is happening? What is going on? These entities, or in my personal opinion at the time, no entity should have the authority to remove my soul from my body. That should be the purview of the Lord God Almighty. And that's it. Like, I don't even know if angels should be able to do that, in my personal opinion, right?
Agreed. I
Even the
agree.
good guys,
Yes.
like, let's just stop.
The Kodega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Kodega and sharing one of yours.
There's a strange tension rising in the air lately. Something just beneath the surface of our collective reality. People from all walks of life are coming forward with stories they never thought they'd share. Missing time, beings in their bedrooms, shadowy memories that don't quite feel like dreams. And while the mainstream writes it all off as either sleep paralysis or an overactive imagination, others, like myself, are starting to wonder, what if these experiences aren't just real, but connected as well? Welcome to another Journey into the Unknown. I'm Rai, the Kodega, your guiding light through the shadowy paths of hidden truths and half-forgotten histories. And tonight, we're stepping into a territory few are brave enough to touch. My guest goes by the name Fringe, and if you've spent any time on X, you probably already know her, where she's helping abductees and experiencers speak their truth. She's a retired law enforcement officer who now investigates something far more elusive, the dark side of the phenomena. We're talking about abductions, entities, spiritual deception, and the growing sense that something or someone is using humanity for a purpose we've only just begun to understand. All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, share it with your friends. You know, the whole rigmarole. And if you are listening on Spotify, I'd love to see that rating. Send me a rating or send me a review. That would be fantastic. And also, again, thanks to you, everyone. We're now considered a multi-award winning podcast, which is crazy, blowing my mind. But enough of that. Let's dive into this interview and bring Fringe to the stage. Fringe, welcome to Kodega's Codex of Curiosities.
Well, thank you for having me. I know what a Kodega is now, so thanks for not making me look it up. That was fantastic intro.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was something I found years and years and years ago. Strangely enough, when I was kind of in my new age world, my new age in the new age quagmire, I'll call it. But I have moved away from that and back to my roots, back to Christianity, and here I am. So, Fringe, why don't you give like a brief introduction and tell everybody where they can find you as well?
So I go by Fringe, it's just a nickname, and I go by Fringe on social media, and you can find me at fringe.com on Twitter or X. I just use that because I hope that if someone were to spend maybe 5 minutes even searching for me, they'd be able to find me. And because of my career and such, I just try to keep it at the nickname, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm 56 years old. I'm married. I've been married for 27 years. I had a career in law enforcement. I'm a grandmother. I'm just a regular person. I'm not on medication. I don't drink. I'm not under the care of a psychiatrist, all those things. And yet I'm here to talk about the alien abduction phenomenon. So kind of put that together. They don't really go, but here I am. And I do this kind of thing just because I can. There's not a lot of people in my position who are able to talk about this topic. It's something that's very ridiculed. We have people, abductees, who reach out to me all the time who some of them can't even talk to their own spouses or their families about it. People are afraid of being fired, of getting divorced, of losing, child custody because of how incredibly outrageous and fringe this topic is. And so I spend a lot of time talking to abductees and just telling my story, just to let other people know they're not alone. This is actually happening. For the rest of your audience who are not abductees, I just ask, hey, ask yourself, could this actually be true? Could it be happening to people? And just keep an open mind. So thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Great, fantastic to have you on. Yeah, my audience is pretty open minded. I do have some abductees. Some of my good friends like Karen Wilkinson and Vicky Joy Anderson as well. They bring a lot to the table when they are on here, and they bring like I have talked to some people who claim, oh, it's all this glamorous and it's great, but I think that's not really how it is. I think there's so much more to this, a dark side that is hidden from many people. Actually, even those that think this is such a great experience, this is hidden from them as well, with what would be called screen memories, or something else. They think maybe it's just a sleep paralysis as well, but there's something much more dark and nefarious as well. So how did you get into this all? Like, where did it all begin for you?
So it began for me as a child, and most abductees, I'd say the majority of abductees, I wouldn't give you a hard percentage, but the majority of abductees are actually lifelong abductees, and we're generational. So this begins in childhood and it goes to old age. That's what the abduction research shows. Now you can have a random, one off or two off here and there. There are people who are just taken. I mean, you've seen the missing 411 stuff, people who get taken who are never returned. That's a whole other category. You have people who are taken and they're not found to be useful, and they get returned as well. But for the most part, and for me, this started in childhood. Now, when I was a child, I didn't know and didn't understand what was happening. I'd had some very interesting things happen to me as a child, but I had no context for it. I didn't put it together. I didn't understand what it was to wake up paralyzed and have creatures standing in my bedroom. And as children, when we speak about these things as children, our parents tell us, "Oh, you're just having a bad dream. There's no monster living under your bed. There's no monster in the closet. Go back to your bed." And so that was my childhood. I had entities in my bedroom. I had a creature living in my hand, which is probably the most ridiculous thing I'll say today.
What?
But
Wow.
well, as an adult, I come to find out that the grays are very adept at changing their appearance, and they appear to children as cartoon characters and things that are more playful and things that are more likely to gain consent from a child. So I had seen the Easter Bunny when I was a kid. So I had these things happen, but again, those are just bad dreams, or that's not real, it's your imagination. Is that your imaginary friend type? Those categories. And then when I was a teenager, I saw Hat Man for the first time while I was wide awake. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't dreaming, I was wide awake, I was not on any drugs. And that was a very interesting experience. That was the first time I thought, like, this thing is going to kill me. I thought I was going to die. A lot of people who meet Hat Man or shadow people get that same feeling from these entities, that there's a
Yes.
hatred and an animosity and an evil that just pours off of these entities.
Can I ask you a question about your hat
Oh,
man?
ask me any questions you like.
What if you described Hat Man, was it just a black shadow entity with a wide brim hat, or was there anything else that was a discerning feature?
No, well, he had a cape on.
Okay.
So he was extremely tall. And it was a really weird, I have a hard time describing it because I was awake. And so it was a shadow, but it was solid. So it was real. But I've also seen many, many shadow people since then that are more pixelated, that are less there. I've seen smoky type entities, but my first time with Hat Man, he was solid, and he was extremely tall. He had to bend down to get underneath the doorway where I was at. So it was it was a very scary experience. And then all throughout my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, I'm 56 now, I dealt with a lot of shadow people. And when I was younger, I saw this as very demonic. I was born and raised a Christian. and I could feel the evil coming off of these beings. I knew, there's a knowing when you're around these entities, and I knew they were there to harm me. And I dealt with that for a long time. My siblings dealt with that as well. And then sometime in my late 20s to early 30s, we had the internet. When I was a kid, we didn't have internet, even a lot of my adult life. I didn't have internet, but by the time I was in my 30s, for sure, we had some internet. And I remember reading, and I think it was a Glamour magazine, that other people experienced this thing with these entities, and it was called sleep paralysis. And I read this little short article, and then I got on my big, giant, computer thing with the tall tower and all of that, and I started looking it up. And I realized, wow, okay, this is called sleep paralysis. It's just a hallucination. It's not really happening. These are not really entities, it's not real. And at this time, I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm an investigator. I deal in evidence. So on one hand, I was raised a Christian. If something's paranormal, to me, that's not crazy or ridiculous. That's a real thing, right? But when I found out that this, what I was experiencing my whole life and my family was experiencing, was called sleep paralysis, and the science said this is a hallucination, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I was like, oh, I was actually relieved. I called up my siblings or the next time I saw them and said, hey, don't worry about this. It's nothing. Just relax. Just lay there. Do nothing. Relax. Breathe through it, and it will go away. And I feel guilty now because I know better. But I spent many years with that. Now, all throughout this time, since I was a child, I was going out of body, and I was a lucid dreamer. So I've been out of body my whole life. I don't know what it's like to not be. And so this is also happening. So I'm going out of body. I'm like floating out of my body to the lights that are in my backyard, but I'm not thinking anything to do with aliens. Never crossed my mind. Now, I can look in hindsight and remember all the times I woke up with my pajamas on backwards, with strange marks on my body. I would go to the doctor and be like, what is this? So all those things were happening, but I did not put it together. And then when I was in my 50s, through some interesting circumstances, it takes a while to tell, I started becoming more and more lucid and conscious during some of these experiences with the shadow people, with being out of body. And the short version is I end up with a shadow person, shadow being. This one was pixelated. And this shadow being gets on top of me. And I'm kind of jumping forward in the story, but the shadow being's on top of me, and it's got me in a what I call the straitjacket hold because I can't move. And I, by this time, have kind of learned how to get out of this hold. And I get out of the hold, and I open my eyes and sit up, and there's a gray alien in my bedroom. Now that is skipping forward in the story, but what I'm trying to do is help people to understand that I now know, in hindsight, I've now met other abductees. I've now read the abduction research. I now understand that the shadow people hat man phenomenon is very much related to the alien abduction phenomenon, which I did not know my entire life. So if you were to ask one of my family members, they would tell you, oh yeah, she sees shadow people all the time, right? But very few people are alerted and aware to this. I'll call it a possibility that the aliens and the shadow people are very much related. And in fact, I have spoken to abductees who have seen them using technology to turn from a gray alien into an astral type shadow being to get from one realm to another, presumably. So that's kind of the short story. Dealt with these shadow people my whole life, and so many people do. I've said many times before, if you ask somebody, have you seen an alien? Most people are going to say no. Have you seen an alien or UFO? Most people say no. Have you seen Hat Man? Have you seen shadow people? Have you had sleep paralysis? That's when all the hands go up. And it's so true. And people do not understand, how this was happening to me my whole life, but I was never awake or conscious enough, or just didn't have the proper circumstances to understand and to be awake and to look over and see this thing and realize that this is related. So that's the kind of the short version. And come to now, now I talk to a lot of people. I've read the abduction research. I talk to other abductees. This is happening to a lot of people. I think the statistic on sleep paralysis from the NIH is 8%. I would have put it higher. So 8% of adults have had at least one sleep paralysis experience in their life. Now, is there a one-off? Yeah, you could have sleep paralysis. I think we probably all go through it just about every night. Our body goes into that weird transition phase, and we all have sleep paralysis. So, but sleep paralysis with an entity actually yanking you out of your body and transporting you somewhere else is a whole other experience. So, yeah, it's all related, and that's how I got to the age of 50 something without realizing, yeah, this has been happening to me my whole life.
Yeah,
And other
you
people
were.
get here too. So,
Yeah, you were. So yeah, you were distracted by reading a glamour magazine that told you, "Hey, it's a sleep
mhm,
paralysis. It's just a hallucination."
it's
And
fine. It's fine.
and I would have never actually personally myself, I would never have put, the shadow people tied in with aliens. Like I always like, oh, those are ghosts. That's tied to the paranormal. Though I do believe everything is tied together. I believe that this is all smaller puzzles of a very large, bigger picture. When you got like UFOs and Bigfoot tied together, I do believe that a lot of this is connected. But the shadow being that brings up a whole other, that opens up a whole other can of worms. I've had my own experiences as well, and that's why I was asking, if you described your hat man. The one that I did see was floating above my bed with red glowing eyes, and when you talk about like this terror, I completely understand. And when you're younger, who do you tell? Do you go to your church and tell them that you've seen these things, or there's no one to talk to really? You're holding it inside. And I do say I do believe like the internet has been a blessing and a curse in both ways. But it's a blessing because you're able to connect with people now and start to piece things together and start to at least try to get some answers or reassurance that, hey, I'm not crazy. Other people have had these experiences as well.
Right. That Hat Man, shadow people, alien thing, never, I never would have put it together if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. And then not only did I see it with my own eyes, but then I started talking to other people this has happened to. And you have people like Heidi Hollis. I don't know if you've had Heidi on,
I have not.
who's got entire books written on this topic of Hat Man, shadow people, and the aliens. I never would have put it together. And so it's curious, how did I get to be in my 50s without understanding what was happening to me? And that's how, because I was dealing with these entities I believed were shadow people. And well, for the longest time, I thought it was just a hallucination. And then when I realized it wasn't, I didn't put it together until the times that I now have put it together. And this video will have other people going, wait a minute, I've seen Hat Man, I've seen shadow people. Maybe people will then say, oh, I've woken up with my pajamas on backwards and this weird triangle thing on my body, or scoop marks, or, sleepwalking, getting locked out of the house, different things that happen to abductees are also happening to people who see shadow people. And I think it's all tied together, in my personal opinion.
I,
So I
I
do
agree.
like to clarify, I'm not saying every single shadow person is an alien. Because we have people like Lou Elizondo who have admitted to doing a remote viewing session where he appeared as a shadow person to an inmate at Guantanamo Bay. So is every shadow person an alien? No, probably not. But we do have abductees who have been around a very long time who have seen them using technology to switch from a gray alien into a shadow being. And so to me, that has to stay on the table. And now, from my own experience, I put it together for sure.
I, I agree, and that's interesting that you brought that up about Lou. When he was remote viewing, he appeared as a shadow being, and you kind of saying that these grays are kind of turning into shadow beings to traverse realities, to go into the astral plane. Perhaps a shadow being isn't a being, but it's just a form that we take when we go to one, to one place or to another, and it's just like this in between form of sorts.
It could very well be. It could just be the astral form of many different things. So, and the technology thing is interesting too, because I spent a long time believing most of this was spiritual or magic or spiritual paranormal. I would call it paranormal. And it took me a while to realize they're using a lot of technology to come off as appearing, supernatural. Things that we think of as supernatural, a lot of it's technology and a lot of it's alien technology, or you could call it fallen angel technology or fourth dimension technology, whatever you want to call it. But it's just a mastery of physics we don't understand.
I I think that is a probably the one of the smartest ways to look at this all, that it's not just this, if we start actually trying to look at it in a scientific approach and scientific way, maybe we can actually start to dissect it and get some more answers. So you had said that, this is a generational thing, and, for yourself, as well. Like, where did it, so this also began with your parents as well?
So I can look for clues now. So my grandmother is now passed, unfortunately,
I'm
on my
sorry to hear
mother's
that.
side and on my father's side. But I've had conversations with my grandmother about seeing shadow people and her going out of her body. And she was a hardcore Christian, so that was very difficult for her. And then on my mother's side, my mother has now seen a mantid creature in her bedroom as of a year and a half ago. She has also seen Hat Man. She has also has her own stories about dealing even with demonic entities. On my dad's side, my dad was straight up levitated in his backyard, I believe, by a UFO. He was worshiping creatures like the lady and another creature called Denino Deatocha, which is just a fake baby Jesus. He had turned from Christianity. He was raised Catholic, and he was approached by an entity who told him the truth about Jesus, and he started worshiping that entity instead. So this is definitely on both sides of my family. I now deal with, and I don't want to give any private information out
No,
about
that's fine.
my family members. My mom has given me permission to say what I just said, but my family members also deal with these types of things: seeing orbs, seeing shadows, watching creatures levitate across the room, waking up to that green glow around the bed, and being attacked by entities. So it's running throughout my family, and the abduction research shows that most abductees are, it's generational. It's been going on for many, many years, decades, perhaps longer. But the modern abduction research shows that abductees have at least one parent who's also an abductee. And that has gone back. I mean, I'm aware of an abductee who has traced her roots back, abductions back to the 1600s. If you look at someone like David Jacobs, he's gone back to the late 1800s for the modern day abduction phenomenon.
Wow. That's mind blowing, hearing about this. And I can understand, well, I can speculate why it's generational. Once they find something, a genetic marker or something that works for them, then why let that go? Keep trying to fine tune. Now, what is the purpose of these, in your understanding? What is the purpose of these abductions?
Well, I can tell you what it appears to be.
Sure.
And something that, so there are abduction researchers who fall on the, what I call the love and light side of the equation, and then other researchers who fall on the negative alien agenda side of things. What they all agree on is it appears that the main purpose of abductions is to create a race of hybrids. And they've been for many decades at least creating some type of a hybrid between, it appears at this time right now to be between the grays and humans. And it's actually taken them a very long time to perfect this and get to a point where even in David Jacobs' research, this is probably going back to the 1990s or the 2000s, they were so close to humans by that time that they were actually living among us. So the hybrids started out in a very obvious. So I've seen hybrids with very, very, very thin hair, super high cheekbones, the pointy chin, and it's very obvious, the large eyes. but they're to the point now where you could pass one on the street and you wouldn't know it unless you were able to feel the psychic output that they put out. So it's been decades, at least decades long in the making. People say, well, the aliens, if they didn't have our best interest in mind, they would just wipe us all out. Well, they wouldn't if they had some other type of agenda. And that other type of agenda appears to be, and we don't know this for certainty, but it appears to be that they're putting these hybrids who now look like humans on the planet. We now have hybrids, according to the research, who are getting jobs and blending in. So that it's a long-term plan, and it appears that they've been successful in it. There's newer research speculating that we actually have hybrids where it used to be, and it still is, where the so-called aliens, they will abduct humans and they will create their hybrids on board. And then some of those hybrids, if they can fit in, they're actually being taught to live on Earth. That's been happening for a long time. But the newer research is showing the possibility that some hybrids are now being born to human women on the planet. And so there's probably more than one thing going on. It's probably, A, B, C, and D all at once happening now.
Wow. This is yeah. I believe that these hybrids are happening, but for them, for you telling me that that there's the possibility that they're being born to human women right now is something that I find quite frightening. It's this infiltration. It's this it's a scary thought as to and what their purpose is. Like I've had ideas. I've had ideas about the purpose. And of course, it's all speculation as to what it is. One of my ideas was that it's a backdoor entrance, to acquire a soul, and it's almost a backdoor entrance back into heaven. This was my thought. It's kind of like I now I have the key to get back in, and possibly start a revolution in there or something. I don't know. That was just a thought that I was thinking about for quite some time. That why they're doing these hybrids. But what do you believe the purpose or the reasoning behind this?
So I agree with you. Being in that environment for quite some time, especially a couple of years ago, I came away with knowing, and I say knowing loosely because they're very deceptive and they're very manipulative. And just because I know something from being in their environment doesn't mean that's not what they want me to think. So you have to be careful with that. But I came away with the knowing that they were trying to, and I wrote it down this way, they were trying to reverse engineer my soul. So what they were doing with me on board is they were trying to reverse engineer my soul. And I would just come away with knowing that this is what they were trying to do. But then I also knew that if they couldn't do that, that they were either going to try to hijack the soul, write it into heaven, just like you said, or try to trap us somehow in these hybrid bodies. And so I don't think it's one thing. I think it could be many things, but the ultimate goal is the same. And that is they are concerned with the destiny of the human soul and trying to use it for their own purposes. What that is, I'm not sure we know 100%, but I mean, it's hard to find an abductee who doesn't say, "Oh, this is a cosmic battle between good and evil, and they care about the human soul." I mean, even people who think this is a good thing, you just come away with knowing that this is what it's all about. And it's when I first realized what was happening to me, which was very difficult to wrap my mind around in the first place. But when I first realized it, I truly thought that these entities were our space brothers. So even though I was a Christian, I thought these are ETs from outer space. They're just, I don't know where they come from. It didn't bother me that they were maybe from outer space. And maybe they were trying to upgrade their DNA, or they did something bad to themselves. And, they were trying to help themselves out with our DNA. And it took me a long time to realize that that was not the case. And when I realized that they were taking my soul out of my body and trying to reverse engineer it, that's when I said, wait a minute, Why would an alien from outer space care about my soul? Why would they care about that? That makes no sense. And I actually have an entire video out that's over an hour long that explains how the aliens tried to get me to change my religion, which is, if they were actually aliens from outer space, they would not care about, right? They would just
Yeah.
study it. They might
Yeah.
be
Exactly.
curious, they might wonder, but they wouldn't try to get me to change it. So it's definitely spiritual. There's spiritual war, spiritual battle going on, and it has to do with our soul. We might not know exactly what it is, but it's not good. They are hostile to humans, and they don't care about us except for that part of us that they're trying to use for whatever purposes. I don't know exactly, but it's not going to end well for some of us anyway.
True. Yeah. It's a. Can I ask you a question? So you're saying that they would like remove your soul. What? How was that? Like that? That sounds something that would be very traumatic, and deceitful almost at the same time.
Well, it took me a while to even realize that they were doing it. So this was happening to me over a period of a long time. Once I even was able to admit to myself, okay, there's something going on here. This is not normal. This is not right. I went through a period of them. I'm going to try to make it short because it's literally an episode by itself. But I went through a period of them trying to convince me I was a star seed. I was here to spread the light to the world, that these abductions were for our own good. And you're going to hear a lot of people, I would say the majority of abductees will say the same thing that they tried to convince me of. It's all propaganda. I mean, they just want us buying into their agenda because it's helpful to them. If we go tell other people as an abductee, or people will call themselves contactees or experiencers, if I go tell everybody, oh, it's for our own good, and I had a positive experience, it's all love and light, well, that just spreads their propaganda. So I was one of those people. They were working pretty hard on me. You're a star seed. You're here to spread the love and light. We're here to save the humanity, all this kind of nonsense. So it took me a long time to even differentiate between a physical abduction and when they were just taking my soul out of my body. So that took me a while because I didn't even know it was possible. When I realized they were just taking my soul, and we could call it an astral body and the consciousness, when they were taking my astral body out of my physical body, that was the big red flag for me. So that was when I said, wait a minute, what is happening? What is going on? These entities, or in my personal opinion at the time, no entity should have the authority to remove my soul from my body. That should be the purview of the Lord God Almighty. And that's it. Like, I don't even know if angels should be able to do that, in my personal opinion, right?
Agreed. I
Even the
agree.
good
Yes.
guys, like, let's just stop. And so when I realized that was happening, it took me a long time to realize that was happening. There were many times that I would be back in my bed and go, wait a minute, did they take my physical body, or were they taking just my soul? And so when I realized they were taking my soul, and I was at times, and I'm going to say something that may be a little wild for your audience.
That's all
At
right. That's all
times,
right. They're pretty accepting.
they're on board. Okay.
Yeah.
I was being put into uh, like what I can only explain as a television screen or a computer screen. So some type of AI interface. I was being put into, and it felt
That's
like,
terrifying. I'm sorry, but
it's
that sounds
terrifying.
absolutely terrifying.
It felt like a trap or a container. It felt like I was being held prisoner, I suppose is a good word, in this environment. But there were other times when I realized, wait, this is not my body. Like, I'm in someone else's body. And what are they doing to this body? And all the different types of experiments they were doing. Um, I went through a spiritual crisis because I didn't think that these entities should have the authority to remove my soul from my body and to put me somewhere else, like completely not in my own physical body.
I agree. And I got one quick question. When
Yeah.
you're okay, so you keep referencing soul. Is it also your consciousness? Are you thinking like, are those tied together? Is that one and the same?
to me, they're tied together. So you can get people. So I have been in situations where I considered the possibility that my astral body was still inside my body, but that my consciousness was gone. So I've considered both, and it's possible that both are possible. But most of this time, this period that I'm talking about, I could feel them taking my astral body out of my body, because I've been out of my body my whole life. I've been out of my body. It's all the time. It's happened a couple times this week. So I have some awareness. I'm not saying it's a perfect awareness, but I have some awareness of being pulled out of my body, being put back into my body, being in someone else's body. I'm actually to the point where I have confirmed being in someone else's body. I have been in other people's bodies I know and confirmed with them, hey, what were you doing on Tuesday? I'm making this up. What were you doing on Tuesday? What were you wearing? Where were you at? And I have been in that person's body. And this has happened more than once. I've had confirmation. I've had abductions with people I've never met in person, but I've met them online and seen them and said, hey, do you have any weird dreams last night? Well, in fact, I did. I had this dream. And of course, being the investigator I am, I let them tell me what happened on Tuesday. I'm not going to give them too much information so that they can scam me. And so where were we going with this? So when I realized that they were transferring, at this time, my astral body was being transferred out of my body. That's when I just said, what is this? How is this possible? What are these things? This is what sent me down the rabbit hole of realizing that these are not aliens at all. And I was coming away with that knowing. They were trying to reverse engineer the soul. And if they can't do that, they're going to hijack it or try to trap us in these. And I think that what they're trying to do is trap us into these hybrid bodies. So a lot of times it's the astral body. Sometimes I think it's just the consciousness, but what they can also do is what's called a virtual reality, where you don't go anywhere at all. They just tap right into your consciousness, and they can put you in an environment. And this will be a lot. I think Vicky Joy talks about this a lot.
She does. Yeah.
They just tap right into your consciousness. They put you into an environment that is very much like the astral realm or the astral environment, and put you through all kinds of different, I call them problems. And your astral body hasn't gone anywhere. So I think they're capable of a few different things. They can take the physical body, they can take the astral body with the consciousness, and I think they can just hijack the consciousness on its own without actually even removing your astral body from your physical body.
Wow. That is intense, and that is deep. And when you're talking about like being put into other people's bodies, I've never really talked about this on my show before, but I've had that exact same experience as well, where we talked about this before the show, where I'm looking at myself and I'm not me. I'm in another body. I know who I am, and I've even told the people who I'm with that no, I'm actually this.
Hey,
I'm this
Fred.
40-year-old guy in
Right.
this this other body, other person's body, and I kind of have to go through the motions of living their life, and doing completing the tasks that they need to do. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
it's
task or a problem. And when they transfer you to these bodies, there's always a mission. I call it a mission. I know I'm on a mission. I know I'm taking that person's consciousness over for a period of time, and I know what the mission is. And as soon as I'm done with the mission, I'm usually gone. It's something that it's way on the fringe, but you would not believe the number of people this is happening to. And there's going to be an overlap, MyLabs component to that. And
and
so
my labs, is that like the military? I can't remember, military intelligence
it's
labs.
a short for military abduction, and it's not a very good term. It's
Okay.
a very old term. It came along way before I was in the community, but it's short for military abduction. But in reality, it's not your brother who's enlisted in the armed services who's doing these abductions. These are deep black projects. A lot of it is contractors. You're Raytheon and your Lockheed Martin, but way deeper even than that. And I think that so there's a human component to this, where we have humans working side by side with non-human entities. And I think and I think they might all be working toward the same thing. Some of them have made deals with the entities. Some of them have made deals, for the afterlife or even for this life, power and control type stuff. But yeah, it gets pretty dark. So the military abductions, a lot of times abductees are being used in military abductions to complete these missions. I mean, I'm in touch with abductees who are on missions a couple of times a week, and it's very military and very mission oriented. It would be as if you were popped into a military body, and that military body is out on some kind of special forces mission. And this is happening to people. I know it sounds insane. Some people call it super soldier.
I was about to say, this sounds like 20 and back as well, something
Yeah.
along that line as well.
Along that line, so I've never, to my own personal knowledge, the 20 and back thing, I've never experienced that. I know I've talked to a lot of people who have, but it's something very similar, where the consciousness and or astral is just transferred right out of the body. You're put into another body to get a mission accomplished, and you're sent right back. And again, it's one of those things that just falls. It's even further gone down the conspiracy highway than alien abduction is the military abduction. It's something that most people, they just laugh at
it. This is incredible. Listening to all this, like it sounds like that like this 20 and back is over here, and then we have like these other types of abductions over here. But if you put it all together, this sounds like a much greater percentage than we really are thinking about. It's not just like 1%, 0.5%. This might be a lot bigger than we come to realize. Like this might be huge. I don't know. It's just it's kind of blowing my mind right now thinking about this, especially when you started, like saying, putting these all together, especially with these consciousness abductions. I don't know if Daniel Rekshan. He has the this website called DSETI. It's the Dream Science and Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and he talks about consciousness abduction as well, and it's quite interesting. And so and that's, I think, plays into all this lost time as well. But it's interesting. That might be someone for you to talk to.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always interested to hear that kind of thing. I just heard a video recently of a MUFON investigator in Florida, and she was saying that a lot of the abductions these days, people are actually watching their own astral body like fly out of their body, and their physical body is still laying in the bed. And it's these entities taking them onto a spaceship. So this is where it got very confusing for me, because I had not been exposed to any other abductees or any of the abduction research. I was just figuring out for myself what was going on. It took me an extraordinary amount of time to realize there are some times when my physical body did not leave this bed. And yet here I am, on a ship, in getting a gynecological exam, meeting a hybrid child, flying around in a spaceship. And how is that possible? How are these entities able to do an exam on what is not my physical body? Because my physical body is still in the bed, as far as I know.
Right.
And then there were times when I would come back with marks on my physical body. So whatever they're doing to the astral body would transfer into the physical body. So that gets super creepy. How is that possible? How is it that whatever the astral body, energy body, subtle body, whatever you want to call it, it's everything we are. It's us without the physical body. How are they doing exams, possibly even creating pregnancies? I mean, does that even sound right? Like that's possible? And so when I think of things that are possible in our 3D physical reality, I think of that as impossible, until it kept happening, until I thought, so I could set up a camera. I set up a camera in my bedroom for months. And sometimes the camera would glitch and the Wi-Fi would go out and it wouldn't pick me up going to the bathroom. It wasn't perfect. But there were times when I thought, I'm almost positive my physical body didn't leave, yet I would come back with a giant bruises on my body. And so how are they doing that? How is that happening? How are they taking the astral body out? And I've said this before, but I think a lot of abductions are them taking the astral body. And I think most abductees, it feels so real, and it is real, but it feels so physical that they believe it's their physical body. And sometimes it's not. Now, the hybrids that they're making, they're taking physical eggs out of women's physical bodies and they're creating these physical creatures. This is a physical thing, it's not just spiritual. So, how do we reconcile that with me and other abductees returning to their bodies after a likely an astral abduction? How does that happen? How does what happened to the astral body transfer to the physical body? And I'm sure someone out there understands it. It's hard for me.
I hope someone can give us an answer, because that would shed a light on a lot of this, because it's terrifying, though, that what they're able to do to the astral body reflects onto our physical body. Maybe it's through that silver cord that connects us, that it just relays that information. And what happens to your physical will happen to your astral. What happens to your astral could happen to your physical. I don't know. And so you set up cameras to document, like to try to catch yourself. Like, was there anything that you did catch that was, you know, like a smoking gun, or your husband, did he see anything, or was there anything like that?
No smoking guns. My husband has been in a couple of incidents himself. We've actually been in a couple of, I would call, shared incidents, a couple of these missions we've actually been on together. He's woken up and seen entities around my body. But the only thing I ever caught on the camera was orbs, which are probably dust particles. So I never caught any smoking guns on the camera. There were times when I've told this story many times before, but I always go back to the same story because this is the one time that I believe I had enough evidence to think my physical body had been taken. So I was sleeping with a camera for months. There were many times it was a canary. It wasn't that great of a camera. It would miss motion. I could get up and go to the bathroom, and it would not even record that I got up and went to the bathroom. So it wasn't a great camera. But there was one time when I, at this point, was sleeping in a helmet of a material that I believed was going to help stop the technology that was able to take me out of my body. And I would put a scarf on every night to secure the helmet onto my head, and that had an emblem on it, and I always put it on the exact same way. At this point in time, I was terrified to go to sleep at night because I had gone into basically a Nightmare on Elm Street type situation where I would be in their environment. As soon as I closed my eyes, I would be in their environment. They were being relentless in trying to get me to their environment. So I put on my scarf the same way every night. I would check my camera to make sure it was set. Well, it was, I think, midnight, and my camera, I got a notification that my camera was the Wi-Fi was off. And I just thought, oh, great. Here we go. The Wi-Fi's off on the camera. But I had this helmet on, which I know how absurd that sounds. And I thought,
Well,
it's
I think
fine.
it sounds absurd, but
Absurd.
if this is something that's continuously happening, I understand completely that you're going to try and find anything and do anything to try to stop this, avert
And
this.
I did everything there was. And growing up, an environment, growing up on the job in an environment where we joked about people wearing tinfoil hats. Here I was as a grown woman wearing the equivalent of a high-tech tinfoil hat to bed every night to try to stop this technology. So I put my scarf on, the camera went out, and I had an interesting night, but I would not have said, oh, I had an abduction. I would have to look in my journal to see exactly what I have written down. But I think it was more of the feeling like I was in a portal or feeling like I was in this weird AI container. But I woke up in the morning and I just woke up and I knew something was wrong. And I just thought to myself, okay, something just happened, but I don't know what it was. And I come to find out that my scarf was on backwards or upside down, inside out, something like that, where the emblem was in the wrong place. And I immediately just knew, okay, how did that happen? I didn't do that to myself in the middle of the night. So I had my camera go out. I had my scarf on backwards. I had a bloody nose and I had a bump. And I forgot about the bump I had on my head until I read my journal. I was like, oh, yeah, I had a bump on the back of my head. And so these were things I try to use to differentiate a possible physical interference with the astral interference. So they can interfere with your astral body. It's probably not going to get caught on camera. But for my camera to go out and for my scarf to be on backwards with the emblem in the wrong place, that's what I'll say. And then my nose bloody and a bump on my head and I'd have to look at my journal, but I had that feeling that I was in a portal. So when I put all that together, I think, okay, that looks like physical interference to me. Something happened. Who took my scarf off my head? I didn't do it. And so there are things we can do to try to differentiate. I've woken up with grass in my bed. I've woken up with gravel in my bed. I've woken up with my pants on inside out or backwards. I've woken up with things on my nightstand moved. I've talked to abductees who have woken up outside of their house. There's a thing called sleepwalking. Could they have just sleepwalked outside their house? Sure. But if you have the impression that you were abducted the night before and then you wake up outside your house, these are the kind of the things we put together to try to differentiate. Was this a physical thing that happened to me? Or, was it an astral or a consciousness abduction? Now, I've been in touch with researchers who say, well, do you have marks on your body? But I can't subscribe to that anymore because I have returned with marks to my body and been fairly confident that my physical body did not leave the environment. So I think you started out with my husband asking about smoking guns. I
Yes,
have
yes.
enough smoking guns for myself where I had the perception of having an abduction and I now have bruises on my body. So that's enough for myself. And there are researchers out there who say if we took the totality of the abduction researcher and presented it in a court of law, it's enough. The evidence is there, anecdotal as it is. But as far as a smoking gun, I don't have it. You have some abductees who claim they have implants and they've had implants removed and stuff like that. I mean, that would be pretty good evidence, I think. But
I was going to ask you, with your bleeding nose, is there a possibility? Have you ever thought about getting checked out if you have any implants, like any type of X-rays or something like that?
I have been checked out by more medical doctors than are actually on the planet by this point. So, I mean, I've been checked out for there's a condition called HHT, and I can't pronounce it, but it's a bleeding disorder. I've had my genetics checked for a bleeding disorder because I've had bloody noses as a kid and, as an adult. I just had an MRI this year in January. I had an MRI to make sure I don't have brain tumor, that I'm not having, that there's no prosaic explanation for what's happening to me. I've been investigated by many, many doctors, at large teaching hospitals because I have some strange things that in my medical history, but nothing where anyone has ever said, oh, there looks like an alien implant in your head, nothing like that. Um, so no smoking guns, no,
Nothing,
to
nothing
answer
in
that.
that concept. But I, in
No.
no ways am I like downplaying any of your
Oh, I
experiences at
don't.
all. Like,
I'm not
yeah,
getting
it's
that from you at all. And even if I were, that's okay. This is something that is so incredibly hard to believe. It was happening to me. And it took me a couple of years to even admit it to myself, let alone to come on to here and talk about it because of how absolutely insane it sounds. And it's okay because I know how hard it is, to wrap the average everyday American mind around this. It's tough, even people who are not from America.
wow. And like, do you believe? Is there a way that you can protect yourself from these abductions? Now, like I know you said you were trying the helmet. It didn't seem like that worked because you still got abducted. But is there anything that you found that did assist you, or not at all?
So I tried just about everything that there is. I don't think there's anything out there that I became aware of that I didn't try. How about that? I'm not aware of anything that can stop the physical alien abduction. You're at the gray alien, or now it's a lot of hybrids who are actually doing the abductions from aliens in spaceships, or abductions from the military industrial complex. There are some techniques that could help with, I think, the more spiritual entities, like your astral entities, even demonic entities. I think long-term prayer can be very successful and helpful, but I have not come across a single thing that can stop the alien abduction phenomenon. Now, I've become aware of people who believe they have stopped it, and more power to them. But inevitably, and I'm not going to be the one to burst their bubble, but inevitably, those people will also say things like, oh, I had this out of body experience, or I saw Hat Man, or, I saw shadow people in my room, or I woke up with the green glow around my bed, but don't worry, I'm not being taken anymore. So, and that's fine. Most of the people, no, I'll say all of the people I've talked to who believe they've stopped it, I just say, okay, I'm happy for you. And I pray that it's true. I have not found anything. Again, I think so. What I think this is going to all boil down to is a bunch of old gods running around trying to complete their agenda of stealing our souls. I'll just
Sorry,
say it.
you just took something, the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask you
Okay.
about old gods coming back.
Oh
So this
yeah,
is
the old
so
gods. Did they ever
great that
leave? That's the question.
yeah, that was a question that I was literally on the tip of my tongue. So what explain that a little bit. Can you go into that just a little bit more?
So you got to go back to the Genesis 6, when the fallen angels mated with the human women and they created some kind of hybrid creatures that we call Nephilim, right? The old gods, were they locked up? Perhaps, they were locked up, or some of them were locked up. Their offspring uh, turned into demonic entities, as far as we know. I don't think we know any of these things for 100%, but we can certainly draw that from the text. And then I think we're left with the possibility of these entities still being around. They were relegated to roam the earth, and I think they're still around. So whether we look at it as fallen angels or that early stage Nephilim, whether we look at it as demons, or perhaps even another incursion of fallen angels after Genesis 6, there seems to be these entities that are largely, they're against God, and they're very interested in the human soul, and they try many, many different ways to get us away from the true God. They want us to worship them. They want us to worship ourselves. They want us to think we're gods. They throw all kinds of different religions at us, especially a New Age religion and Gnostic religions they throw at us. And so they're just constantly engaged in the agenda of getting humans away from God. That's how I look at it. And so ultimately, I think we're either going to side with these entities, and our loyalty will be with these entities and false religions, or our loyalty will be to the one true God and creator of the universe. When it comes to the old gods, we have people in the UFO community who are being contacted by entities claiming to be the old gods, even named gods like Hathor. You've heard of the Chris Bledsoe story, I'm sure. He's in touch with Hathor. Well, he's not the only one. We have people in the community who are in touch with entity claiming to be Hathor and claiming to be any of the old gods that you can possibly imagine, especially from the Egyptian mythology that might not be mythology at all, looking for avatars to inhabit for some cosmic war that's coming up. So there's a lot of really weird stuff that's going on. And you have these entities saying, I am an old god. My name is X, and I need your body. It's super creepy.
Extremely
So
creepy.
that's happening right now today to multiple people who I'm aware of. Imagine the numbers of people this is happening to who I don't even know. So it's a very small community, and there are multiple people in the community this is happening to. So that's just, you know, a lot of it is just manipulation and deception. You know, maybe they're not old gods. Maybe they're just a low life, low level astral entity claiming to be an old god. But there's a whole lot of it going on, and they're claiming that there's some cosmic war coming up they're getting ready for. So here we are.
I find that fascinating. So do you believe? I know you brought up the Nephilim. Do you believe perhaps that the hybrids are the new age, this current timeline Nephilim? Like, because they're like the hybrid of the humans and of the aliens, or whatever those really are. Do you think that they're kind of like a new form of a Nephilim, and like you said, to blend in, because the Nephilim of the past were either giants or men of renown who really stuck out. Thus, I guess hunting them down, like David and his mighty men kind of did, would be much simpler, because it's blatantly obvious who's a Nephilim and who isn't.
It's no longer blatantly obvious. So I look at this, and I don't know everything. I don't know exactly what's going on. I look at this as the modern day hybrid breeding program of Nephilim. I mean, they're doing the exact same thing. What are the aliens? Do we really know? There are the top of the food chain for the so-called aliens are the mantids. Well, what is that? It's they look like mantids. They look like praying mantis. What is a reptilian? They are probably hybrids themselves. So they're probably Nephilim themselves, some kind of weird hybrid experiment that happened who knows when. I have no personal experience with the mantids, but I talk to a lot of people who do, and they call them the ancients. They've been around the longest. Well, we have cave drawings of things that look just like these mantis creatures. So I look at the aliens themselves as some type of a Nephilim, some type of a hybrid between your very powerful, we call them fallen angels for lack of a better term, and what are they mixed with? I don't know. I mean, supposedly the lore says that even the Greys have some human DNA in them. So the Greys themselves are already hybridized. And now you've got them trying to create a hybrid that looks human. So to me, this program has been going on for thousands of years. The modern day, maybe only decades old, but it's the same exact thing we read in Genesis 6. They're still doing it. And to me, they're just perfecting it to wherever their agenda is. So the short answer is yes, that's exactly what I think is going on. The story has not changed. They want us to, the story of the garden hasn't changed. They want us to believe that we can be God or become God or that we are God, the whole new age thing. The story hasn't changed. They just repackage it and try to sell it to us again.
This has been really mind opening. I really appreciate this conversation, Fringe. It's and the time that you've given for this, because I, I I think this definitely needs to be heard more and more. It needs to get out there more and more. And I know more people are speaking up, but some of the things that you're telling me, for me, are new, and it's kind of it's helping to piece this puzzle together. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thanks for even giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience. I hope you said they have an open mind. Hopefully, they still have an open mind.
Of
Um,
course.
I try not to pretend I know exactly what's going on, but I have spent enough time with these creatures, hundreds of experiences with these creatures, and enough time in their environment to at least come away with the understanding that it is spiritual and it's not good. I can say those two things very confidently. Whatever this is, it's not for us. It's not for our good. So do with that what you will. I know other people say otherwise. In fact, I think it's something like 85% of abductees decide that they actually had a positive experience at some point. So
Yeah,
it's a lonely road, but someone has to do it.
it is, and I was, like I said, it was literally one of my listeners that kept on saying, no, aliens are evil, and I was like, well, maybe, and that was just like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and
Right.
here I am now, and I'm fully, so shout out to Susan. It's
Good job, Susan. Good job.
yes, it is it's, and I think that's important, that we're always open to listening to new ideas, and like, okay, and allow it to, like, you don't have to accept everything, but allow it to come in,
Mm.
sit with it, and then maybe it is the truth, and it'll become your truth. And it's really interesting. Yeah. And like I said, my audience is open to everything. We've had everybody from Randall Carlson to Gary Wayne to you name it. We've had them all. Karen Wilkinson and Vicky Joy Anderson. So we are open to this all, and to hearing all these new ideas, and just be prepared for this upcoming war. I think there is, because that is, we are in a spiritual battle. And you know I don't know, is there any last comments you want to give to the audience, or any kind of thing that you want to say before we head out?
No, you can reach me on X, Twitter at fringe.com. If it's happening to you and you need someone to talk to, shoot me a message, and I'm happy to chat. And I also have an Experiencer, a Discord, where people get together and chat. And sometimes it can be very therapeutic for people to just have someone else to talk to. Because I mentioned in the beginning of the show, people can't even talk to their spouses. They can't talk to their family, can't tell their boss or their coworkers or anything, because they're afraid of being, called crazy. So reach out, send me a DM. I'll send you the Discord, and you can hop into the chat and just talk to other people this is happening to. And a lot of times it can be very therapeutic for people just to have someone else this is happening to chat with. So thank you. I appreciate being here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Fringe. I appreciate it as well. Thank you. All right, everyone. That was Fringe. And, so what if the stories are really real? What if those late night whispers that we hear, strange marks, those lost hours, aren't just nightmares, but literally data points in a much bigger and much darker picture? Like, Fringe isn't just sharing theories; she's sharing her own testimony from, and also from abductees, from experiencers, from people carrying truths that are just too heavy to share in a regular conversation. You can't share, and I agree, you can't share it with your friends or your family, because it is so deep and so heavy. Now, so whether you believe it all or not, one thing is clear: something is happening, and ignoring it won't make it go away. Now, if this conversation has stirred something in you, don't just let it fade. Follow Fringe on X, check her out, and her Discord. All that information will be in the show notes. So you gotta have the strength and stop being silent. And as always, everyone, I'm Rye, the Codega, your guiding light through the shadows. Keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the code gas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. The velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Kogas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that call,